In this lesson, we are going to talk about relations. So we're in section 2.1a. What you would think of as a relation is something you haven't probably seen that term in a while or heard of it very often, but a relation is just a set of ordered pairs. In the past, you've had ordered pairs where you say they form a linear function or a linear equation because they make a straight line. You'll notice this graph here that you see doesn't do that. It's just almost like a scatter plot. So you can see that there's ordered pairs all over the graph, but there's no relationship that we're talking about with them. Now, until we define a relation as a linear function or a quadratic function, we just call it a relation. So we're not giving it a specific name. We're just calling it a general word, which is relation. So you can see that we have a set of ordered pairs. So you can fill in the vocabulary here. And then just as a review, the domain is your x values. So for example, we have this ordered pair right here. If I was going to label it, would be -3, 1. So my domain right here, the x value is part of my domain. Every x value is part of your domain. So if I was going to list my domain for these ordered pairs on here, I would list every x value. So I would be moving across the graph. I would see that I have -4, and then I have -3, which I already listed. And then as I move across, I see that here I have a 0, here I have a 1, and here I have a 3. We're going to be working a lot with domain and range throughout the trimester, actually all year. And so this is just kind of the start, just so you know that it's your x values. It's kind of a review for you. Then if I'm looking to do my range, that's your y values. So ignoring what I just did with my ordered pairs, I'm not going to be looking at my x values at all. I'm now going to be looking only at the y values. So then as I move across, I would move from bottom to top. So this is my lowest point right here. As I list those y values, that would be -2. And then I'm going to move up as I go. So then I would have 0, 1, 2, and 3. If that was confusing to you, I'm always just going along from my origin and then I'm counting up by ones. Or when I did my domain, I was counting left to right. And then, of course, positive, negative. So I'm just listing the y values of each of those ordered pairs. If you wanted to list each ordered pair separately, you could. So for example, this one I'd say is 1, 2. So my 1 was right there, and my 2 for my range is right there. And that's just a little bit of a review from some vocabulary words that you should already know. Then another review we're going to have is the definition of a function. And this is something that when you did it in Algebra 1, you probably didn't fully understand what a function is. Some of you did, some of you didn't. It's one of those things where you first learn it, and hopefully now when we cover it again, it's going to be something that you really understand by the end of the trimester, by the end of this chapter even. You're going to know that it says up here function is a special type of relation. So again, we're categorizing that relation. We said a relation is the general statement. When we're being specific, we call it a function. One of the ways that you can think of that is how we all go by our first name. And so if you were going to call me my first name, you would say I am Jamie. There are many Jamies in the world, especially when I was growing up. I always had 3 Jamies in my class. So that's the general part of my name. If I'm being specific, I would say I'm Jamie Beefert. That's why we have last names. That's why we have middle names even, because sometimes people have the same first and last name. And so it's a way to be more specific with how we categorize something. And so that's our function. It's a special type of relation, so we're being more specific when we describe it, in which each element of the domain is paired with exactly one element of the range. Now, this definition, the words I think sound confusing sometimes. And so one of the ways that we can check to see if something's a function, and one of the ways most students really prefer, is called the vertical line test. And so what we do is you'll see that on these graphs I have on my board, you obviously don't have this on your sheet, is I have this green arrow that you'll see I can move around. What I would like you to use for this is your pencil. So you're going to hold your pencil and it's going to be vertical. And as I move this across, what you're looking for, and some of you will remember doing this before, what you're looking for is as I bring this green line, this vertical line across my graph, I will never be touching 2 points at once. That's what makes something a function. So as I go across, and notice it's obvious right here, I'm never touching 2 points at once, right? So is this first graph a function? Yes, it is. So down here where it says function, I'm going to write yes. When they ask for the relation, they're asking you to list the ordered pairs. And so I would like, just so we get in the habit of doing domain properly, I would like you to list them left to right. So I'm going to list my first ordered pair, which is negative 3, 1. Then I have 0, 2. And then lastly, I have 2, negative 1. And we'll write those as a set of ordered pairs. So I'm going to use that set notation there. So there's what we'll do for each one of these. So now I want you to pause the video, please. Try the next two. List the relation, see if it's a function, then we'll talk about them. So as I go to the second one, I'm going to list my relation first. So I have negative 2, 1, 1, 2, and 3, 1. If I use my vertical line test, let's get that out of there. I'm going to pull this line across and notice that I am never touching 2 red dots at the same time. That's what I'm looking for. If I'm touching 2 red dots here, it's not a function. I'm not, obviously. So that's a function. So when it says, is it a function, I'm going to say, yes, that's a function. My last one, again, I'm going to list my ordered pairs left to right. So I have negative 1, negative 2. This way, notice I'm having 2 in the same line. I'm going to list bottom to top because that's how we do range. And I'm not going to be super picky about that right away, but I just want us to get in the habit of working left to right and bottom to top because that's going to help us in the future. So for the second one here, I'm going to say I'm at 1, negative 1. And then my last ordered pair is at 1, 2. So hopefully, as you were imagining this, I'm taking my green line, and right here you will see that I am touching 2 points at the same time. What this means now, think of the definition of a function. It says the domain, so our x values. When you see the word domain, you should be thinking x values. So really, if I want to put this in terms that make it easier for me to understand, sometimes we're going to replace vocabulary words in our head, right? So it says the x values are paired, or is paired, an x value we could say, is paired with exactly 1, so only 1 element of the range. So we're thinking y value. So my x values, notice here, this ordered pair would be 1, negative 1. This ordered pair is 1, 2. What I want you to notice is that it's the same, no, that's not what I wanted. Give me a second there. So we'll say 1, 2 again. It's the same x value right here. So you'll notice it down here also. My x values are the same. They're both 1. I cannot have my x values be the same. That is not okay for it to be a function. So when it asks me if it's a function now, I'm going to say no. Now it might ask me why. I would say because I have 2 of the same x values. And that's me writing it in my own words, so it makes sense to me. Technically, if I wanted to give you my math teacher answer, I would say this is not a function because not one element of the domain is paired with exactly one element of the range. But for what we're thinking in our head, because we want to understand how this works, I'm going to say, nope, I have 2 x values. Now, for those of you who aren't as visual, and you can look at this relation, you maybe could have just looked right here and said, oh, I have 2 of the same x values. Look at that. That can't be a function then. And you don't need the vertical line test, and that's fine. However it works for you is how you should do it. And I don't care how you come up with your answer, as long as it makes sense to you and you're always getting it right. So that's how I would do all of my functions. Now, one other thing that I want to point out is something called, well, before I do that, give me a second here. I'm going to just point out right here, that's not what I want. I want to show you in the second problem right here. Okay, this is where I'm looking. See how I have 2 of the same y values? They're both a 1. Do you notice that? I want to point out the fact that in order for something to be a function, it can't have two of the same x values. So nothing in the domain can be the same. The y values can be the same for it to be a function. So the fact that both of these ordered pairs have a y value of 1 is okay. It's still past the vertical line test. Okay. The last thing I want to point out, and I'm just going to kind of clear our screen here for us so we can see these graphs again a little better. And this isn't in your notes. This is just something you can jot down below your notes if you wanted to, because this is something that's going to come up for us more. So one of the things, a term that you're going to hear in the future or right now, is a one-to-one function. For something to be a one-to-one function, we can't have any two of the same y's, or excuse me, x's, or two of the same y's. So no domain value or range value can double up. If I'm going to do that, first of all, it has to be a function. So for something to be a one-to-one function, so that's the term we're using, a one-to-one function, I have to have it first be a function. See the word function in there? So it has to pass the vertical line test. So of these graphs, the only one I right now know is not a one-to-one function is this third one. I've already said it's not a function. So that one's out. In order for something to see for me to see if something is a one-to-one function, I do what we call the horizontal line test. So I'm going to see if my line lets me flip it, which it's not doing. Oh, there we go. Sorry, we have new smartboard commands this year. So as I come here, I'm going to have a horizontal line. Because in order for it to be a one-to-one function, I can't have two of the same y values. And so some of you are already thinking, well, we know where that is. But what we would do if we didn't is I'm going to do this horizontal line test. So as I move up or down, we will try to go bottom to top, because that's how we do range. I'm going to move this line and see if I'm ever touching two red dots at the same time. And I'm not, right? So the first graph is a one-to-one function. So I'm just going to jot that down under function where we wrote yes. I'm going to write one-to-one. So I can look back at my notes, and when we talk about one-to-one, I have that down. Now my second graph, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start bottom to top. That's how we do range. And I'm going to move this line. And as I move, look right there, I'm touching two of the same y value. Now, if you were paying attention before, we already talked about that, didn't we? I've actually moved this so my circles went off. There we go. Notice how we said we had two of the same y value. They're both a 1, which is exactly where this is happening. And so this is a function. The answer is it a function? Yes, it's a function, but it's not a one-to-one function. Now, I don't want you to worry too much about one-to-one functions right now. It's not something we're going to do a lot of work with this chapter, but I wanted to just introduce it so later on when we talk about it more, it makes more sense. The last thing that you'll see on your notes is in the bottom. After vertical line test, it says, is it a function? Problems 1 through 6. Some of those I think you maybe could answer now, and I'd like you to guess and say what you think a function is, and that'll kind of tell you what you know from previous classes or what you remember. I think you should know 2 of the 6 answers. That's what my hope for you is. Really, 3 of the 6 you probably should know, so try to get those. But I want you to try those for tomorrow, and it's just a guess. You can be wrong. Put in an N or a Y, but do it in pencil so we can erase it tomorrow. And we're going to go through those in class. So those 6 problems we will do together because we can talk a lot about the graphs and things.